go. Let's start it moving with, let's welcoming Sweetwater.
Welcome to Discograffiti, the podcast that obsessively rates and curates the greatest music of all time before the 21st century renders that music obsolete. I say no way, not on our watch. I'm your host, Dave Gebro, and in this episode, we'll be turning our spray cans on Sweetwater, along with very special guest, Corbin Betleyoun. This is part one of We Are Stardust, We Are Over, the 4 least fortunate acts that played Woodstock, which will also include killer one-a-month episodes on Burt Summer, the Keith Hartley Band, and Quill. We'll learn about the road to Sweetwater's career peak at Woodstock, the tragic event that derailed success for the group, and the tough times that descended upon them once the specter of a career in the industry ceased to be a realistic notion. Coming up, we have Terry Kirkman and Jules Alexander from the Association rating their entire output, episode 1 of the John Landis tapes, and Sergio Diaz from Os Mutantes talking at length about his band's classic debut. So don't go anywhere when this episode's done. Subscribe. Here's a couple terrific ways to find out what's coming up round the bend. You can join our Facebook group, Discograffiti Soldiers of Sound. We're on Instagram and Twitter too, in case you don't mess with the Zuck. Or you can write to info@discograffiti.com and sign up for our weekly email list. Okay, back to business. First things first, you need to know just how seriously I take this craziness. Discograffiti is heavily researched, and the music's always reassessed with fresh ears, even the bad stuff. We're not just covering albums. We do a searingly honest deep dive analysis of all EPs, singles, comp tracks, relevant solo work, and bootlegs. Every release is slapped with an objectively accurate star rating between 0 and 5, which allows us all, the real reason we do this, the Tootsie Pop reward at the center of the rock and roll lolly, to come face to face with the true shape of an artist's overall arc. Be sure to follow along with us chronologically. The link to our legendary playlist is in the show notes and also on our website at discograffiti.com. And away we go then with Corbin Betleyoun as we punch through to some conga-drenched truth about Sweetwater. Perennial support act for their prodigiously talented hippie brethren, turned being forced to accept the pain behind right place, right time, not always equating with meant to be. Tonight's guest appeared out of the mist to keep the entire Patreon community on its toes. He's an up-and-coming psychedelic soundsmith whose project End Switch promises to entice and enrapture with mellotron moods and Baroque pop-flavored mystic folk. You can hear those batshit crazy inspirations battle it out on his first single, If You Ring That Bell, and the fresh out of the Sonic Bakery End Switch Photograph EP, wherever songs are streamed. The man's taste is second to none. I counted on fan feedback to eventually keep me up to my eyeballs in awesome music recommendations. But this mother trucker is a one-man, how the fuck have you heard of all this shit kind of dude, seeing as the dude's just a little baby of 24. He's also about to leave his career to assist me full-time in taking this thing and ramming it super fucking hard into the public eye, so hard that it pierces the public eye, shatters its skull, and enters the soft, gooey gray matter of the public mind, a la the best scene in Lucio Fulci's X-rated 1980 masterwork, Zombie. Lads and ladies, would you please stop giving in to internal anxieties for a single goddamn moment and focus on the man I consider the perfect living, breathing thing that symbologically swallows you all up and becomes the Discograffiti avatar created specifically as a receptacle for my life's work. Just Rapunzel that shit and let it all hang out, Discograffiti style. Here he is. Ain't no stopping him now. It's Corbin Betleyoun.
I feel like I've been hit by like a giant wind. It's beautiful.
Hopefully not an idiot wind.
Oh, no. A flattering, wonderful wind.
Sweetness
illustrious.
personified. Thanks for coming on the show, man. So you are a true student of music history at 24 years old. You know, I had really good music taste at 24, but you have really dived pretty deep for a 24-year-old, I got to say.
I just love things that get stuck in your head. Man, nothing touches me more than a good song does, honestly.
Nice. So you are a member of the Patreon community. And I say that because, you know, I'd like to underscore that I'm really excited about doing shows with people in the Patreon community, although it's obviously a selling point to allow people who are on Patreon to be on the show. At the same time, I'm really offering it as a selfish thing because I can get the biggest star in the world, the biggest draw in the universe. They're not necessarily going to have incisive things to say about the bands or artists, whereas the people who are going to be part of the Patreon community are probably going to have a comparable level of knowledge of music to me. You do. You definitely do. So that's why I'm so excited about doing this one with you.
I'm hyped. You know, living in my life as I guess I'm like on the border of Gen Z and millennial. I don't know. And just everybody around you thinks that like the oldest possible music there is like the Beatles, or if maybe they know a tiny bit more, Led Zeppelin. And then if you say, oh, well, I really happen to like the Kinks, which is a big band. I mean, most people know the Kinks, I would say. And then they go, what? And you go, oh, my God.
Yeah, I mean, but when I was younger, you would say the Kinks and people would know what you were talking about. But if you started talking about Arthur or Village Green, forget about it. Now, right. Pitchfork has a separate list for the best rock and roll albums, and they're not even in order because who gives a shit with that dying art form?
Yeah.
The chips are really stacked against you, man.
You know what? I make up for it. I trowel all the bins I possibly can. If it's got something even slightly psychedelic or just, it's got that flavor about it, you know?
Yeah.
Where somebody was just like, let me think slightly outside of the box, or I don't know. That's what attracts me.
Your tastes are interesting because I love harmony pop, soft pop just as much as you, but your taste runs to the very sickly sweet. I don't mean that in a pejorative way. I mean, like, you really, really like that all-timer favorite of yours, the Chesapeake Jug Band.
Oh, God. Yeah, no. Chesapeake Jukebox Band.
Jukebox Band. Okay.
Yes.
It's a good one. It's just very Caucasian, super Caucasian.
Really. But you know what? I love soul too. I love, on the opposite end. I love any music, man.
Yeah, me too, man. Truly. So tonight's band, I don't really have any direct connection with them. I would say throughout my whole life, I've never had a direct connection with their music. The only thing that I knew was that they were the opening band at Woodstock.
One time in college, I just sat down and listened to the first album. All I remember was that I liked a track called My Crystal Spider. I put that on for my wife right before we started recording. So specific episode rules for the We Are Stardust, We Are Over series is that,
typically we barely look at live albums and only really include them if it adds to the story somehow, if it is a necessary step in the tale. But for these four artists that are going to be covered in this series, their Woodstock set is given heavy consideration as a discographical contender, and it's an allowability to rate the Woodstock set as a best or worst album of all time. Let's introduce the characters in today's episode. We got Nancy, Nansi Nevins, lead vocals and guitar, August Burns on cello, Albert Moore on flute and backing vox, Alan Malarowitz on drums, Elpidio Cobian on conga, Alex Del Zappo on keyboards, and Fred Herrera on bass. You've probably noticed just from the melange of words that I was using that there's a lot of people in this band, 7. It's kind of like the Parliament Funkadelic of jammy conga flute bands. And there's men and women. And a bunch of different ethnic names in there. So we got a Sly and the Family Stone-ish situation here. As far as their legacy, they were, I would say kind of right behind Jefferson Airplane in doing that folk rock / acid rock fusion. They threw in cello, flute, and congas to the usual rock instrumentation. That and the huge amount of members was pretty unusual for 1968. They blended California psych with jazzy keyboards with a sort of classical influence even. Not a sort of, a classical influence, especially with the flute and cello. They formed from a group of friends that jammed at coffee houses in LA in the mid-60s. Don't know if you know this, Harvey Gerst, who had co-written It Won't Be Wrong by the Byrds with Jim McGuinn.
Yes.
Unofficial member. He sometimes acted as road manager and played guitar for the group. So let's do the run-up. You know how this works. We try to get to the first release as quickly as possible by giving you all the relevant historical data. Sweetwater was composed of 8 individuals of different ethnicities. They kind of were birthed through doing a series of freeform instrumental jams, which you can definitely hear in their music. They were LACC students, and there was a sort of like unplanned vocal sit-in by a girl they hadn't even met yet. That was Nancy. Half of the band had also sang, but their jam band thing, they got a lot tighter after Nancy Nevins came in as lead singer. So in the summer of 67, before ever playing live, they worked really, really hard toward admittedly a vague goal of just playing the Whiskey a Go-Go so they could get signed. Just as the Doors had, they figured that was their route. So during that time, they began to hear about something called the Monterey Pop Festival that was, just coming together at that point. They actually scraped together some money. They drove up there without actually entering the actual place, but kind of hanging out in the parking lot, which is a great image. Hearing every note, they soaked it all up, and they just were like, this is, that was the new goal, is to work towards something like that, which is pretty prescient of them. They basically worked as hard as they could to be a great opening act. They became a noteworthy live act. They wound up playing with every big name rock act of the day: Jimi Hendrix, The Who, Rolling Stones, The Doors, Led Zeppelin, The Dead, CSN, Jefferson Airplane, Big Brother, even opening a show for Duke Ellington.
Wow.
They did become regular performers at the Whiskey. They were featured on major TV shows, and then and FM rock radio embraced them. In 68, Reprise Records, they decided to sign the band to capitalize on what the kids were doing. But they blended more than just psych into their stew of influences on the debut. There was all kinds of stuff. I'm not saying it was a deft blend, but it was a blend nonetheless. Folk rock, Latin rock, classical, there was a bunch of stuff. For Sweetwater, it was fucking go time, my bro. Phase 1, The World Was Their Oyster, and other variations on the Promise Cut Tragically Short theme, 1967 to 69. So, Sweetwater, the debut record. I'm tired of talking. Talk to me, Corbin.
This kind of, San Francisco, LA brand of psychedelia is very interesting to me because it really melds, so many different influences. Even the cultural zones, I guess, that those areas, San Francisco, just Southern California in general, I guess, that they inhabit are just filled with so many different cultures and influences. And I think one really great thing about that psychedelic scene was their readiness to kind of embrace all those influences. They have just incorporated cello. Cellos wouldn't be, a part of any rock scene until, basically prog, but like ELO, come 4 years later, 5 years later. And it's really quite impressive, I think, the amount of musicianship that's in this.
This is the calm before the storm, because I know you have some unflattering things to say, but that's okay. We can just let that sit for now. This is the highest showing they ever had on the charts. So let's talk about the recording of this thing. It was recorded at the Sound Factory in Hollywood with Dave Hassinger, who's, if you listen to this show, you probably know who he is. He worked with the Electric Prunes, with the Stones, mid-60s. The list is pretty tremendous, and he has a very identifiable sound, to the point where if I know that he worked on it, I'm interested in hearing it, no matter who it is. there was originals tossed in with covers of traditionals. You know, there was all kinds of different instrumental palette on there. And interestingly, I would say, especially because of the congas, I would say the band that I would, think of first when I would compare them would be Santana. But they're so different because the sausage grinder for these guys, it comes out so white. And Santana, it comes out, super Latin. Right. And that's why it connected, I think. Whereas this, I can imagine a record company being like, fuck Santana, let's go with the one where, people could take baby steps into Latin.
Right.
But yeah, that's the full-on Latin is what people wanted.
As a music fan, as a music lover, I love Santana's debut album and a little bit beyond. But like, I don't know, the congas in this album and what they would do with them down the line. Oh my God, it's a lot. It's a lot, and I can appreciate them. I respect you, congas, but it's a lot.
True. It's very Miami Sound Machine. I believe all the arrangements were done by Alex Del Zoppo and Frank Herrera. And the two of them, I think, kind of put the pieces of this thing together. But, it really is obviously a band effort. One thing to keep in mind, and we'll get to why, Nancy Nevins, who was unquestionably the focal point of this thing.
Right.
This is the only album that she's involved in throughout the entire process. It was released in '68. It entered the national charts at number 200, where it would stay for 2 weeks. And that was it. That's as big as they got. Their big break was number 200 for 2 weeks.
God, that's crazy.
There were 2 singles from it, Motherless Child backed with YOY, and My Crystal Spider backed with What's Wrong, and both failed to chart. Even though it was, had limited success, they still were, invited to Woodstock. And let's talk about the music. Okay, so track 1 is arguably, or maybe even inarguably, the track they're most famous for.
Yeah. And
I really don't like it. It's Motherless Child.
I kind of dig it. I mean, I really do like Grace Slick's vocals. And I mean, this is pretty much, to me, this is pretty much Grace Slick to a T, and a little bit of Janis Joplin, the very, very on-brand rock voice for a female rock voice for the time. But I really like that sound, at least in her voice.
I fucking hate it because here's why. So I believe when Nancy sings a ballad, it's very affecting.
Yeah.
Because when you take that hard living whiskey soaked voice and, temper it down a little bit, it's a great contrast. Like Rod Stewart's early 70s ballads. But when she does this kind of stuff, then to me, she's a grade Z, she's not a grade Z, but grade C, Grace Slick. And, it's really just the one part I just can't stand is, and I'm a la 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 la. I mean, that's very ungood and extremely dated. The hippy dippy trippy flower dance shite, to me, that is an extremely trite thing that she does there, and she keeps repeating it. And every time she does, I become more and more distanced from the song. And it seems like she's just trying to, what would Grace Slick do here?
When I say that I really like it, I really do just like that. Sometimes I feel like a motherless child, where she like kind of goes down a couple steps in like the tonation of it. I really, really dig that. And maybe that's kind of more so what I'm thinking in. I personally really like that. But I think the biggest crime is that it's 5 minutes.
Yeah, it's long. It feels long. And it's, I like the chorale harmony intro. I think that's really sweet. Ultimately, and oddly, because this is kind of what they're known for, even though it's a traditional song, this would be a skipper for me. I mean, I'm not really a huge fan. I think I'll put it on the playlist because they're known for it. But on the second song, which I also am not a huge fan of, Here We Go Again. Mm-hmm. Those dudes just provide some seriously shitty background vocals. That's the takeaway there.
The worst part about this record is the like fifth dimension harmonies, and it's like, no, I don't mean to throw any stones at the fifth dimension that much. It's not that much of my cup of tea there, but I mean, oh my God.
I mean, I probably like them better than you, but it is under the same heading as that stuff. So if that's a turnoff, which It makes sense if it would be a turnoff because that's an acquired taste. Then stay far away from this. For Pete's sake, this I like. This is a lounge psych instrumental that to me is just what the doctor ordered. But I believe that some of this band's lyrics is some of the all-time most stilted, trite, garbage poetry that I've ever heard in my life. To me, this should have been the actual first song.
I mean, there's vocals per se, but it's their kind of choral type thing. I think that works pretty well. I mean, it's pretty interesting. It's not.
I don't think it's great, but it's good. There's moments of greatness on this, but they're sporadic.
Right.
Come Take a Walk. It's an inconsequential but very pretty little love song, and the outro I really particularly love. It features a beautiful section that kind of approximates the feel of Nancy skipping down the street with her lover.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's like kind of a 20s, 30s cartoon kind of little sound. Very pretty.
Yeah. This, I'm starting to think at this point, like, wow, this is kind of coming together a little bit.
Right.
The construction of the record, it really is middle heavy, which is interesting, but most records are not. Then comes What's Wrong. What's Wrong is, it's probably Motherless Child and What's Wrong that they're most famous for.
Yeah.
I really hate this song. I hate it. Here's why. I'm just going to do a spoken word redux on the first verse, okay? What's wrong? What's wrong in our schools? Politicians are blowing their cools over they who refuse to follow the rules, though they should be separate dealings. It almost feels like they read the newspaper and pulled out some, countercultural concepts. There's no connection to it. It feels very embarrassing to me. That's just me. It always did. I don't like the song at all.
I get the 60s version of social awareness and kind of like those platitudes, blowing their cool.
They're woke.
Yeah. Yes. There you go. But the part separate dealings, like, what does that even mean? That just reminds me of, like, I remember I was like 13. I wrote poetry, and I remember I wrote soothsayers, and I thought that was the coolest thing. I didn't even know what that meant. I just thought that sounded so cool, and that's what that reminds me of.
Yeah, this is, anyone out there who's listening and thinks that, I'm being super harsh. I'm not intending to be. I'm not doing it for sport.
Right.
It's a trigger for me. This kind of overly politicized focus on the lyrics is, I think, a replacement for actual content.
Right. I mean, because look, like, it's all platitudes. I think so. Because if you look at something like, if there's hell below, we're all going to go. There's like pain and suffering and just experience that this man is like trying to convey to an audience through his music, and his politics are being, let out on the table and just shown that this is his human condition. Whereas this is
also like, look at Woodstock too.
Right.
I'll give you 10 seconds to think of one performance that was political. Star Spangled Banner doesn't count because it was instrumental.
Right.
Go ahead, take 10 seconds.
I wish Iron Butterfly got to be in Woodstock.
Yeah. Well, maybe there was, I can't think of any. So this is like, that cringe-inducing light AM, tepid faux hippie take on counterculturalism.
Right.
There's something in that I like less than conservatism.
Right. No, I agree, because it feels like what people, I think all of LA is. You know what I mean? Like,
but that's only because it actually is.
Okay.
All right, the next one, In a Rainbow. This one is a step up, I think. I'm in a rainbow and I'm feeling mighty good. It's pretty sweet. I dig it. They do I'm feeling pretty groovy from these drugs I just took songs much more convincingly than their political broadsides, thankfully.
I like it a lot, I think, because it's got a really like cute vibe to it. It's fun. I like it.
I liked some of those things they did that showcased a sort of innocuousness about Nancy. That's some of my favorite material that they did. Next one is clearly the height of this record, My Crystal Spider. Right? Unexpected, right? So
I like it.
Yeah, I mean, as soon as it starts, we're in much deeper psych territory.
Right.
There's Middle Eastern flourishes, some Nancy vocal gymnastics that recall Grace Slick, but in a good way, in an inspired way. The best on the album, as far as I'm concerned, in a direct connection there, it's really the only song that takes any chances.
I agree.
Also love the mid-song cello breakdown. I really wish there was more like this.
No, and not to get ahead of ourselves, but I think the cello kind of becomes one of the best elements about the later bits of the band. But no, it sounds really good here. I mean, My Crystal Spider, I love how she says it. It's just so fucking cool. Like, oh, it's so
actually,
good.
One thing that sucks about this song is, as far as the legacy of this song, is it's clearly a psychedelic song, but they actually walked back the psychedelic implications of the lyrics later on. And I'm talking about like only a small handful of years ago. One of the dudes, I can't remember who wrote it, claimed it was literally about a pet spider. I know. I hate that shit. Crystal Spider is the apex of their career, as far as I'm concerned.
I really, there's a line. What is it? It's like weaving webs of paisley. That's just so cute. I love that.
That's what we do on the daily.
Right.
Rondeau. Yes, it only features a slew of la 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 vocalizing, but that idea beats the pants off yet another What's Wrong. I actually like Rondeau. It's 1:15, but it's the last song on the record that I like.
I mean, it's short and sweet. It's not really too consequential. It's nice, though.
Two Worlds is another one that's nice and innocuous in that Nancy Nevins sort of story time way.
Yeah.
But it's at 4 minutes. It's overlong by about 2 minutes.
Oh, and then there's also a very good friend of ours, the flute. And the flute... I mean, like I'm
a sucker for the flute. I don't mind it.
No, here it's okay. But I feel like here's where we start to kind of see, and we'll start to see it go on and on with the band, that the flute is starting to become a favorite of somebody's besides the flute player and whoever's arranging things.
I think initially it was an all-inclusive broadening of the instrumental palette and synonymous with freedom and of the times. And then I think it just became a space filler when Nancy's voice couldn't do the heavy lifting.
No, I think that's a good point.
So Through an Old Storybook is next, a peek into their future. No Nancy, no thanks. That's the deal here. The song itself is just okay.
Yeah, it's just the vocals. It's just the male vocals.
I know. It's just the thumbs down, man. Yeah. Why oh why? Back and forth male-female vocal growler sort of a deal, and a sort of tepid attempt at a quasi R&B thing with barrel house piano and a heavier lean on vibe than melody. What I'm trying to say is here, it's a shitty closer. Unless, I'm sorry, I'm stepping on your feet. Do you like this song, sir?
No.
There are curious amounts of bands like this that straddle the middle zone between AM and FM. Your parents and their kids, those generation gap stragglers who got swallowed up in the cracks, as the plate tectonics of the countercultural 60s didn't give room for any vague, in the gray responses toward what was happening around us, and you had to choose a side. So Sweetwater's debut, it demonstrated that they kind of picked a side, but they don't sound fully committed to anything in particular. I mean, sometimes not even the melody of any given song that they're playing. Most of all, it's about vibe, jamming, and the celebration of the 1960s, ululating female vocalist cliche. I give it 2 stars.
I give it 3 because I really just like Nevins. I think, she's not doing anything new, but she just has a really good energy about her. And I think, especially Crystal Spider.
No, I agree that she had potential makings. It's hard really to say if she would have pulled it off, but she could have had a career. The other guys, I'm not really, I don't think so. So then the next thing is their Woodstock set. Obviously, August 1969, August 15th. This was obviously their big break. They were scheduled actually to open the festival. However, they got stuck in the extremely legendary traffic jam that led to the venue. And Richie Havens was actually the one who performed first. Eventually, they were flown in by helicopter and they performed second. but they were the first full band to perform at the fest. But keep in mind, Richie Havens performed with 2 other people, so you could call that a band. So in case you're, keeping lists and stuff, and you're really particular, I'm just going to say they were the second act on the bill. They kind of had it blown for them before even needing to blow anything themselves. So John Morris, he's like kind of pulling it all together, seeing if like the chaos has resolved itself to the point where the band could actually start. And he steps up to the mic, and in what sounds like at least a close relative to the English language, he says, "Let's start it moving with, let's welcoming Sweetwater." Here's what happens within 5 seconds. And I want to underscore this because in real time, it blows by pretty quick. And then we're in their set. But let's parse these 5 seconds, because to me, these 5 seconds are the remainder of their career. It's just a fumbled fucking football. Here's why. First of all, that's not English. Let's start it moving with, let's welcoming Sweetwater. Okay, so then immediately after that, they kick into Motherless Child, right? But here's the problem. You know the last song that Richie Havens played?
No, I don't.
Motherless Child.
Are you serious?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
And not only that, he hit it out of the park with an iconic version that, as far as I'm concerned, is the most emotionally riveting and moving version of the song I've heard. Not that there's a overflowing list of contenders, but it's not Sweetwater. And so in 5 seconds, it's a 1-2 punch that is hysterically apt based on what was to occur in their career. That moment, of course, is when the congas hit and never stopped hitting. Sweetwater's set began around 6:30 p.m. They were on stage for about an hour. And now with that incredibly, incredibly cool box set, it's 1.5 days long, this box set. Oh, and I believe it's every documented moment of the festival. Corbin and I were able to parse the entirety of Sweetwater's set, because it's not on the release of the record, of the Woodstock record. Okay, Motherless Child. Lots and lots of flutes and congas. Man, do they stretch out here. But the reality is, picture a clunkily written Soul Sacrifice with a 4/4 or forget about it. We have officially hit the ceiling of our abilities skill set. So in the end, this version is as aimless and meandering as Richie Havens is focused and searingly powerful. Do not like this.
The congas, it goes on for what? Like 3 minutes? I mean, it feels like 5.
I think it's longer than that.
And then you got the flute that starts to come in, and it's just so loud. It's like peaking, and it is insanely annoying.
All right. But, things are on the up and up on track 2, because Look Out is a little better. Definitely an improvement, tighter, slicker, and under 5 minutes. So in general, simply more considerate of my life. The rhythm section feels inspired, which gooses the flute solo into feeling like it actually has a purpose instead of just being a meandering color. It really feels purposeful. Look Out, I love.
I mean, it's pretty good. When I was listening to it and I was hearing some parts of the flute, and I was just like, oh my God, this is probably how you feel about Jethro Tull. Yeah. And I like Jethro Tull. It's just too much for me, I think, the flutes.
I'm not going to argue that point. I don't mind that stuff nearly as much as you do, but I totally get it. And after that song, you have Alex Del Zoppo stepping up to the mic with his stage patter about, remember that thing about the man had to stop us all and bust us on the way here? He's trying to explain why they were late and blaming it all on the pigs. You gotta love that shit. For Pete's sake, more meandering hippie dog shit like the low end of the patchouli totem, mostly a 2-chord keyboard vamp, and the grossly awful and grating electronic cello solo. The version on the debut, I'm a fan, but this 7-minute version is just way too much for me.
If I was there and I was high and I was nude, I'd be really into it.
Yeah,
I'd really be feeling,
but only under those extremely specific.
Exactly, because the vibes would be hitting me, Dave. I would have no clothes. My mind would be open. All of my pores would be taken in that 7-minute fucking cello.
When I was listening to their set, I was walking down the street. It was the morning, and I really felt like I was there. I did have that an almost synesthesic feel. So it is their music. It is transportative, and it does convey those vibes because of the instruments that you hate.
Yeah,
it does bring you there.
Right.
All right, Day Song. Day Song, I think, is great. Immediately, this very spare Nancy Nevins performance is gorgeous and stunning and like a peak of sun through the clouds. It's just cello and her bare vocals with unnecessary male background accompaniment, to be sure. But, why is this perfect piece of music so goddamn short while all the bullshit is 10 minutes long?
I know, and that's the thing, because we'll see it later on. I feel like they get this momentum going, and sometimes, like when I'm making a song and I have something, I'm like, oh, this is a lot of fun. This is really good, and then like I'll just harp on that, and then my brain just goes, now what? And I feel like that's what happened. You get this good idea in your head, and it sounds really great, but then it's like, I don't know. I think it's just easier to just become a jam band.
To a lot of bands, I think that what that means is we don't have to rely on dynamic tension in a song.
Right.
If you don't know how to develop dynamic tension, you just go that route. It's the rare jam band that can, do you know Garcia Peoples?
I do not.
They're a modern band. They're very prolific. They're very, very good. They're like the next level in what I would want a jam band to be like. They're conceptually very interesting, in a way that I don't find King Gizzard to be.
King Gizzard is like content. And I think there's a lot to dig into, but like it is just mountains of things, like sound.
So then we have Nancy has some great stage patter because, man, her voice.
Yes, it's so good.
Sounds like David Ruffin. Just that like whiskey-soaked soul voice.
Okay.
Whiskey-soaked, like literally. She was apparently got very, very bad alcoholically. She just has this great speaking voice, and she says something to the effect of, guess it's going to take a little more time to get it together. And you can really, this is where I was really transported because you can really hear the helicopters overhead. I mean, you can hear, I believe they pan it so that you can actually hear them roar by overhead as if they're flying right above you. Then What's Wrong, which is, this is just, look, I hate this song, What's Wrong, but this is the ultimate shitty, bloated crap version of it. To recap, this is an impossibly overlong live version of their worst ever song. It stinks, and it's down there with the worst garbage that was churned out onto Yasgur's crops.
So it made really good fertilizer, you're saying?
Yes. The following year was his best year ever because.
Oh my God. Oh, I bet. I do kind of like some of the key work that goes on in the middle of that track. I vibed with it. But other than that, it is still that fucking song. So, well,
it's nice to see that you had some kind things to say about it. My Crystal Spider is then next. Definitely some interesting cello drone. That interpolates a kind of dreary live version of what worked wonders as a studio-bound thing when they were able to use psychedelic effects. So not bad, but not as good as it could have been either.
And her vocals especially, because her vocals on that track are what really sell it to me. I hear Bjork in her voice. I don't know, and it's on Crystal Spider. I swear to God. It's so interesting.
Not totally outlandish. Yeah, conceivable. Look, if Bjork was watching VH1 in 1999, two worlds. Oddly, and in contrast to Crystal Spider, this is a lot better than the version from the record. It's got a hell of a lot more muscle in its undercarriage, more substance upon which to build those acceptably meandering flute solos. And whoa, toward the end of this, she lets loose and goes nuts, Bray. Yeah. And promptly the tension fizzles after that. So just in that, again, to explore that very brief moment, that's why they were openers, because if they created dynamic tension, it was perhaps an accident, or to be more charitable, it was maybe one of them or two of them stumbling onto inspiration, but the rest of them just couldn't join them in that place because they couldn't make it happen. So that's why they're openers. They couldn't maintain whatever tension they were capable of establishing. Also, Bird Call / Speaking in Tongues by Nancy during one particular section is definitely worthy of mention as well. Huge applause at the end of this one.
Is this the part where like some dudes are like climbing a tower and they're
no,
like...
that part is their whole show. You know, in terms of when it's talked about.
Yes.
Talked about during all of their stage petter sections, because those people never got down off the tower. Why can't we all get along, right? I mean, the next stage petter is Nancy, and she's saying there sure are a lot of people here, and the band intros. So then we have Why Oh Why. The shitty album closer begets a sloppy rhythm and blues mess of a live track. And then Let the Sun Shine In? No. And Oh Happy Day? No.
I don't know why. I think maybe I kind of like that song, but I kind of dug it. But
that's cool, and I kind of get it, but I never liked that song. I never liked that everybody did it. Just really not kind of into it. Look, I just want to talk about their set for a second. So I definitely, as a whole, I like their set better than their record. It definitely serves as the opening of a gigantic live performance in terms of the festival as a whole, because it doesn't steal any of the thunder or dramatic tension away from the quote unquote main performers. But ultimately, their crack at the big time, which it's possible that they either knew or did not know was happening at that moment, was kind of DOA.
Right.
Their attempts at wild jamming are incredibly inconsistent. They're just not good enough at their instruments to pull off those long, winding flower dance kind of Grateful Dead moments. Yeah. But here and there are gems in their performance, mainly rooted in Nancy Nevin's stunning ability to inject some whiskey-soaked blues naturalism into her performance, instead of attempting futilely to beat Grace Slick at her own game. Those are the worst types of cliche moments for Sweetwater. This was not their big break, because this band would never have been a huge act, but it's probably just a little bit better than history will allow. And maybe that's good enough. So I'll give it 2.25 stars.
Maybe I'm just a shill, but I give it 3.25. These are these artists' like really good moment. You know, this is a piece of, even if it wasn't that great and obviously didn't really lead to much, but this is their moment in history. And I think that's something kind of beautiful in a way, even though I want to take the conga drum and throw it off of a moving car. But
you know, there were so many festivals at that time, and I wonder if they were cognizant that this is it.
Right.
You know, I mean, because you start to think that way, you're not in the moment anymore.
Right.
But to ignore that this is obviously happening is also an error. So there's a real fine line there without derailing what you're giving out to people. Anything that people know about Sweetwater pretty much ends there. But the story is interesting. It's a sad one. But they started to get some TV appearances after Woodstock. It seemed like they might actually make it after all, following years of grueling buildup. Alex Del Zoppo said, we had been doing a lot of television then, and one night the band had all gathered at my parents' house, which was in the back of my father's television repair business, to view one of our appearances. We had just done Woodstock, and we were getting a lot of media attention. I remember that we were all there waiting for Nancy to arrive, and then that call came in. So that call is the biggest left turn in their career. There were, two big left turns. It was Woodstock and this phone call. Hey, lads and ladies, Dave Gebrow here. I abandoned my career and moved my family 3,000 miles to be able to focus exclusively on Discograffiti. And so if you're like me and enough is just never enough, then please visit patreon.com/Discograffiti and become one of our Patreon soldiers of sound. Discograffiti is an entirely listener-supported show, and it's also intended to be a 3 times a week music deep dive experience. So do us both a favor and consider giving it a shot. Trust me, I'm working hard for the money, so hard for it, honey. There's the main show on Sunday, a Thursday wildcard episode, which is either an interview with that week's guest or an offshoot show like Rock Cousteau and Queasy Listening. And then on Tuesdays, there's the humdinger of them all, Discograffiti's The Private Press with Paul Major. You got nothing to lose. If you don't dig it after a month, you're refunded, no questions asked. Once again, that's patreon.com/Discograffiti. 4 months after Woodstock and 3 days after the band performed on the Red Skelton show, On December 30th, 1969, a 20-year-old Nancy Nevins was severely injured when her car was hit by a drunk driver. She suffered a brain injury, which left her in a coma for 10 days, and she almost died. So what they had to do to save her was do a tracheotomy surgery. And so what happened during that was her vocal cords were damaged irreparably. So afterwards, she could still sing, but she lost a lot of her vocal range and things were never the same. So she only sang a few songs on the second record and then only one song on their third and really final record. Sweetwater put a halt to their touring, and any career momentum that had been developed over years was lost. Their poor luck continued when in 1970, after all that shit, none of their performance was included either on the 3-record movie soundtrack or the 3-hour movie. Phase 2 almost only counts in horseshoes, 1970 to now. So my phase separations, they're usually the result of musical focus sea changes. But sometimes, as with tonight's band, at least 51% of this phase designation is based on the tragic accident. So album number 2, 1970s Just For You. Whom they're speaking of, me no. Yeah. So Richard Perry, the superstar producer, tried working with them. He was not a superstar at that point. He tried to work with them, but that didn't pan out too well. But the second record was completed with other members of the band taking lead vocals. So the few times that the band tried to include Nancy after her accident, their standard stadium volume level overpowered her voice, which was recovering. Right. So Alex Del Zoppo said, after a while, we were compelled to audition female singers to fill in for Nancy, particularly on the road, but we couldn't find the right one. I guess it was sort of like what American Idol is today, just 98% crap and a lot of girls with very strange styles. We certainly got a lot of response because we advertised it as who we were. Nationally known band with major label contract, etc. But Nancy was amazing. It turned out that no one could replace her. She could really interpret and be a different singer for our diverse songs. She was a natural. You could see the intuitive creativity flow out of her. So we went on without her or a replacement and kept our fingers crossed. That's the story of Just For You. Talk to me about that fucking opening title track.
Just For You, I think they're just talking about Satan because it is rough.
And hear me, I'm thinking that they're talking to the steel-plated armadillo douchebag of Tarkus.
It'll put you to sleep as much as
well, I mean, because all of a sudden, I think they're starting to move in a kind of prog direction.
Yeah, but
this first song, just to give you some backstory, it's over 10 minutes long. It's for a band whose lead singer had just suffered a car accident and could no longer hold that kind of weight, to have kicked off their second album with a 10-minute progressive track is fucking ballsy. It's an interesting decision. It's ballsy. It's commendable. But, all right, so here's the downside. This thing is multi-parted like a prog tune. It starts with Bird Song and Freeway Sound, which, by the way, was recorded April 11th, 1970 at 3:30 a.m. And unfortunately, the song, at least the initial section, sounds like a 2-year-old wrote the melody, once the song actually kicks in. And then the choir section, the less said about the Oi Como Va section, the better.
Oh my God.
And the multi-part male chorale vocal choir section, the conga breakdown, basically backed into a corner and forced to try out all these new things as a replacement for being able to explore whatever their true identity as a band may have been with Nancy fronting that thing. They were forced to experiment. Nothing bad here, just zero in the way of remarkableness. Alex Del Zoppo rips it up on a keyboard solo about 8 minutes into the tune. But man, talk about too little, too late.
The things that I praised them for at this point, it really is kind of coming down to just the cello and some of the electric piano and the keyboard work, because that's kind of what I like as a listener. I think a lot of like Baroque sounds and electric piano stuff is cool, but that's really the only stuff that has stuck out to me in this track, especially, and the rest of these albums. Yeah. And I kind of hate that because I want to be like, oh, I hear more in it. You know what I mean? Like, I can be really positive about it, but like, oh my God, this is just.
Well, see, the appeal to me in what the band offered, was on the much more simple end of the spectrum. Day Song, the second track,
right,
is my favorite song on the record. It's one of my favorites of theirs. It's a gorgeous version of a song that they performed at the festival, and a testament to the loss of Nancy from the group. Her losses felt hard here. This is a great song. The other song, where she's back, it's another great one. But, Day Song really underscores what we missed.
Yeah. It's really...
You hate it?
No. I don't.
You love it?
I don't love it either. I really like it. I don't think I could say I love it, but what's the difference between that? I don't know. But it's a minute 57 seconds. I don't care if there's only 2 or 4 instruments, whatever. Just let it play. I think that there's a lot going on here in its simplicity, but I don't think it has a lot of room to breathe. It's like being in a really hot car and then rolling down the window just a little bit, and you get this nice little thing, and then somebody goes, "Oh, never mind. You get to die in this car."
Dude, that is so specific. It's like it had to have happened to you, but I so don't want to ask you at what point did that happen to you. I really don't even want to go there. So next up is Windlace, a cowbell slathered 2-chord vamp that seems to want to get its feet wet in prog waters, but there's just not enough instrumental prowess to go around to get intricate and naughty. So it just settles for whatever the fuck it is, which is not much.
Is it an electric piano that's going on in that, in those first couple seconds after like the sound effects?
I'm going to go with, I don't know.
I don't know either. I think it is, but I mean, I like that. I like the sound effects a little bit, but it's just, it's a lot of sparks and a lot of no fire.
Yeah, this one I'm not a fan of. Not really liking it. Don't like the next one either compared to what? This to me is redolent of if War never progressed beyond opening band level talent. And then you like that Pile of Turds? Or I know I'm obviously stacking that question a bit by asking it that way.
This is the flute player singing, right?
Not quite sure.
I'm not sure. He does not have the voice for it, but but he's like, I don't know. To me, this man feels really sincere about what he's singing.
Yeah, there is a disconcerting and reprehensible sincerity to the way all the guys sing in the band. Like a Peter, Paul, and Mary stodginess.
Yeah.
Like, I really mean this. That's how you had to sing if you really meant it. Song for Romeo. Nancy's back with another stripped down, mainly acoustic guitar and string laden ballad with tastefully deployed flute and piano accompaniment. This is a fucking great song. If it was just Nancy doing her thing, I think, honestly, cut down on the fucking, endless amount of band members. Do a 3 or 4 person thing. That's all that Nancy needed, really. Song for Romeo is terrific.
I really agree. She's really making this her own, I think. And I would totally buy this record. Like, if I just heard Song for Romeo, I'd go, okay, this is the type of album that this is. Hell yeah, I'll buy that.
Exactly. My Janis Joplin playlist is not under Janis Joplin. It's under Big Brother and the Holding Company. Yeah. If I even want to look at the songs of or listen to the songs of Janis Joplin on her solo stuff, even on Pearl, I got to look up Big Brother. That's how I think of Janis, is somebody who was in Big Brother who started a solo career. That's more of a perceptual thing. Nancy should have been wined and dined by record companies and taken out of the band. Not because the band sucks, but she would have done better in a different setting. Not in the setting she wound up in, that as we'll talk about, but simply a different one. Without Me stinks, and then Look Out stinks.
I kind of like Without Me.
My only note on that is oof. That's it.
I kind of like it. I kind of like his vocals. And it kind of goes back to compared to what?
I'm ripping my clothing right now. You're dead to me.
No, Look, I admit it's bad. He can't sing it. He really cannot hit those notes. but there's something about it. I'm kind of a soul sucker for soul. There you go. I kind of like that. And when I say I like it, because I'm blushing hard right now, I like it compared to what else we got going on.
Yeah, I know. It's a belt for sure. Look Out, which is the last song. I say thank God it ends on a Nancy, even though it's her weakest song on the record. I like her gentler stuff, and not just because she's a woman. When she starts belting, she just lapses right inevitably into the Grace Slickicisms.
Yeah.
So Nancy is on 4 of the 7 songs here. The guys try to fill in the cracks, but they just can't. It doesn't work. They're tepid vocalists. I think it would truly karmically make me an evil person to rain shit down on Sweetwater because their lead vocalist got hit by a fucking drunk driver and they were forced to make a bad album in order to keep the commercial release momentum going after the Woodstock machine rumbled into being. But if you were to really examine this record that almost nobody on the planet could possibly give a shit about, you see a band working to embrace an adventurousness that wasn't on the horizon when Nancy's throat had the capacity for full flight dynamics. The truth of it is, it's entirely possible that the car accident hastened the band's need to look in the mirror and see that they were not going to make it as a major act, and so to get on with their lives a little bit sooner than if they had lived out the whole banging their head against the brick wall throughout the 1970s and 80s thing. Yeah. So sometimes godsends come in very strange packages. I'll give this one 2 stars.
I give it 2 as well. And I think, honest to God, I think why it's such a step down for me is that opening track. I mean, I don't
mind it. Even though I don't like it, I at least see that, okay, like they were like, all right, we have to do something to fill space on this record. Let's just go for it.
I mean, that's a good point.
I don't like the song. Yeah. I'm just saying, when I think of the record, I remember it.
No.
There's a lot of their stuff that's just so bland, it's not memorable.
Right. No, I think that's a really good point, honestly. I you know what? I really like their use of sound effects on this record. I think I kind of always like that. I don't know why, but I really, it kind of makes it feel more like an adventure.
Studio-based productions.
Yeah, it feels like an adventure. And yeah. I mean, on the front cover, they're in a little boat. I don't know. It kind of reminds me of that.
It's not a bad record. It's not a great record. It just is.
Yeah.
The product of needing to exist for whatever reason. 1971 Melon, which is a concept album about a cyclop-titted woman.
Yeah, I wish.
So this is a more folk-oriented production. This is their 3rd and last album, really and truly. Co-produced by Wiley Brooks, also known as the Cosmic Man. I don't have any further information about this.
Where'd you find that? What tome did you find that he was the Cosmic Man?
It was the Evil Dead book. So by this time, they weren't touring with Nancy, and they were also starting to realize that her voice wasn't getting any stronger.
Yeah.
So their situation not only wasn't getting back to where it was, it also wasn't getting any better. So as well, many in the band were making different contacts within the entertainment field and seeing if there wasn't anything else out there for them. Alex Del Zoppo had done sessions as a keyboard player for Gene Clark, which was, specifically his infamous unreleased 1967 solo album for Columbia, as well as the Beach Boys and others. Fred Herrera says by the time we got to the 3rd album, there was some friction between various members of the band. Very often it was segmented, where we would each come into the studio at different times. Kind of like the White Album, but without good material. He didn't say that, I did. So Alex Del Zoppo said, in the middle of all of this, Alan Malarowitz decided to quit the band. He was going off to get married and decided that he didn't have time for it anymore. In the process of auditioning drummers, we had gone through all of these macho types who would pound away every one of their hot licks. And at the end, there was this skinny kid with shades who just smoked the place, and that turned out to be Ricky Fattar. If you're a Beach Boy fan or a Ruddles fan, you know who this is.
Hell yeah.
He listened and he was perfect. So as an added bonus, we get Ricky Fattar. Not bad.
I did not know. That is fucking cool.
Yeah. So couple of cool things to recommend this record. Let's just start at the top. Get It When You Can, an Alex Del Zoppo song. Kind of a thick, muscular new sound, courtesy of a fatter fuzz bass and Fattar on drums. He's not on every track. He's on a balance of them, though. It'll do. I mean, it's competent, not much more than that.
This is definitely a different album. For You kind of has a, Just For You, sorry. Oh my God.
Yeah, I was like, what the fuck? Who the fuck did I invite to be on this show?
Just For You. I'm so sorry. But Just For You.
You promised you wouldn't fuck this up.
I'm so sorry, Dave. Just For You, I think, has some has like the kind of the end of a momentous thing. Like, we got to kind of take the bits and pieces, like a Post Smile type of thing, even though those albums are really good. You know, you still have bits and pieces of that project kind of being peppered throughout. So there's still the feeling of some pre-Woodstock and just post-Woodstock feelings on Just For You. Yeah. But here on Melon, I mean, this is definitely a new piece of material.
It is. Yeah. It feels different. One song in particular is a very big departure. It does feel different. And all the better for it. I mean, what were they going to do? There was no breadcrumb trail aesthetically to follow from the second record. So Get It When You Can. Do you like that song?
Yeah. Again, you got that groovy electric piano. It's fine. It's some okay, I don't know, breakfast oats. I kind of like oatmeal. It's okay.
Dependable, right?
Dependable. Keeps you regular.
Fill my ear hole.
Right.
So the second track is inspired and sad. It's the only song Nancy sings on. It's called Don't Forget. It's also the only one she wrote. So basically, this is the entirety of her contribution to LP number 3. It also features a very interesting music concrete style with droning piano stabs, not to mention harpsichords, and some extremely mournful cello. And this verse, don't forget her, he'll bring you roses, cherry, cup of rum, smile all those hours. Then you go, the day comes, you say you were just having fun. I mean, it feels like an elegy to a prematurely killed off career.
I mean, this must have been a really tough time for her.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, she probably felt like she was on top of the world. I mean, she was 19, I think, when that first album came out. Like, that's crazy.
Yeah.
And then she kind of goes down to here, and I really think you can feel it. I mean, she's got that really great. I mean, I think this is I don't want to say dark. I mean, it's just melancholy, but it's a dark song that I think really is her again at her best, honestly.
Yeah, it is. She is. And it stands out like an island in this.
Yeah.
The rest of the material does not have, understandably so. These guys are saying goodbye to their career, but she's connected to something that's allowing her to really convey what's going on. And for that, I'm grateful. It's a great song. It Ain't Easy, an Albert Moore contribution, a boring stab at a Xerox copy of Feeling All Right.
Yeah, no.
That whole piano pounding, Traffic Feeling All Right vibe was good when Traffic did Feeling All Right. And it was good when Joe Cocker covered it. And that's the end of that story.
You know what? It was okay when every other motherfucker in 1970, 1971 did it.
It just recycled nonsense. I'm happy today. You know, when I was listening to this, I came up with unquestionably the name that they should have gone with as a band, because it describes them to a T. Lukewarm. Like lukewarm? Like not... You see where I'm going with this?
I'm happy today. Like, it doesn't even go anywhere. It's like someone's pushing something that's too heavy for them.
The next song's not much better. Rejoice, the Smile of Man is by Fred Herrera. Written and sung by the guy. More on him later. The worst song on the record by a mile.
Yeah.
It's a very bad song.
His vocals.
Same writer and singer then gets a 9-minute song afterwards called Take It From the Splice Boys. It's an endless jam that I strongly recommend for any Love fans out there who thought Revelation that is side B of Da Capo, was the only worthwhile track on that record.
Well, whoever the hell that is, God bless you. Yeah. But
So we'll circle back to those two songs in just a moment. But after that comes Naturally, an Alex Del Zoppo song, more piano pounding, feeling all right, hive buzzing. The biggest problem, besides the sickly, obvious copycat songwriting style, is that Del Zoppo's voice is totally charmless.
Yeah, it's flaccid.
It's whiskey wiener. It's like that post-festival hippie malaise that seemed to set in for, I think, a lot of people's careers who played a lot of festivals and whose drug consumption never ebbed, or who had like a lot of hurdles thrown their way that they had to overcome. These guys, it was insurmountable, obviously. Don't Give a Hoot, an Albert Moore song. Albert's voice is better than Del Zoppo's, but splitting hairs. It's just differing levels of I'm not really the singer, sorry. This melody sounds like the R&B standard that's slowed down to a sort of proggy crawl.
I think it's a better political song than the other one on the first album.
It's a skipperoo. Faith is only a 30-second cello dirge. Then we are stepping into something that was very surprising to me. Alex Del Zoppo wrote this song, Join the Band. It's the last song on the record, and it's the only dude-only song that I love. I guess they just had one more left in them, because it's like this super lively song that sounds absolutely unlike anything they'd ever done, with a completely unexpectedly catchy and glammy melody, with growl sing-along and the whole deal, suffused to the gills with kitchen sink see you later, and it fucking just works wonders.
And you know what? I like the flute here. I think it works.
I love that song, man.
This was we'll get to that, but this was one of the bigger surprises for me. I enjoyed this.
So Fred Herrera. So the 14 minutes in the center of the record are taken up by songs the producer wrote and sang. If that conveys any essential information you'd need to adequately judge this misbegotten, sad album, imagine the producer literally hijacking your record. God. It's so weird. The concept of that, you can make a movie about it. I mean, the whole thing is redolent of one thing and one thing only: Nancy's absence and the cruelty of fate. Yeah. They're done. And it seems like, in contrast to LP number 2, that they now know they're done. Even though there's a couple of really strong tracks, I give it 1.5 stars.
Really? I got to do 2.25. I thought it was better than...
You're a big fan of Sweetwater, bro. I got nothing negative to say about that.
Well, I'm writing the encyclopedia. That's my big drop this episode.
The Encyclopedia Sweetwater Tanica? I've heard about it. Obviously. In the summer of 1971, Sweetwater broke up. 4 years later, Nancy Nevins was allowed, I don't know how this was orchestrated, how it came together, but she had a solo record that came out in 1975. The players who accompanied her, I mean, this was not a low budget affair. So
no, it does not sound like it either.
Nancy Nevins definitely deserved at least the one solo record. It starts off with one of the worst songs of her career, Sunny Face, it's called. It's an absolutely horrid, synth-laden Dixieland jazz sort of a thing, over which Nancy tirelessly scats and howls and sounds actually very drunk. As I've read that she had become, by that point, an alcoholic. On top of that, you can immediately hear the damage to her voice. And overall vibe is that I was immediately sad to hear it. A completely misconceived opener, kind of like the eyelash-batting Betty Boop disingenuousness of Genevieve Waite's Romance is on the Rise from the year previous. This is a terribly ill-advised opener.
Yeah, it's corny as shit.
It's like you've been gone for 4 years. This is how you choose to reintroduce yourself. What is it that you're connecting to here? What is the feeling that you feel? And what is the feel that you're hoping to make other people feel? Because this is devoid of any of that.
And, historically, it really does feel like the entire, deflating of the 60s tire.
Yeah,
it's like...
It does. That's fair to say. It's not hyperbolic.
No, it's 1975. I mean, like, rock is in a very weird place, I think, in 74, 75. Like, there's great shit, obviously. And then there's these guys.
The solipsistic disco lights and disco ball are already starting to glint.
Yeah. And their version of rock and roll, you know, and where Nancy comes from is, it's fading.
The second song is the only worthwhile song on the entire record.
Yes. No, that's what I was going to say was I was kind of expecting you to be like, oh, fuck this song too. I kind of like this.
Song I liked a lot, and I had high hopes then for the rest of the record.
Yeah.
But we could always say It Was Raining is much more like it. It's, I would say that it's sort of Crystal Gale territory, but anything is a step up from Sunny Face. Kudos go to the busy but very effective string and woodwind arrangements. Not for lack of trying here, that's for sure. This would have been the way forward for her had things worked out for her in a solo career.
About this record, so I originally tried to find it, and there's like a YouTube rip of somebody like playing it on like a Crosley Cruiser, one of those like really crappy record players you can get at Walmart.
Yeah, I got one of those.
And like, oh my God, I could not even hear. It was bad. And that was my first introduction to this record. So already I'm going in kind of bad. And then I finally found some good files of it. And I was kind of impressed with the production on a lot of these.
A lot of work was put into this record.
That's what, yeah.
All of the songs are originals, except for the closer, which is a Rogers Hart cover of 10 Cents a Dance. Mm-hmm. In essence, this is the last release and testament from phase one of Nancy Nevin's career, of her entire music career. And she was supported by tons of big studio pros. Do you know who played on this? You had Al Casey from, the Wrecking Crew, Victor Feldman, John Guerin, Earl Palmer, Bud Shank, and on and on. So tons of credits. It must have been dumped pretty quick and not promoted at all, because I saw a used copy online go for $300.
Really? I saw a bunch for like $8.
I didn't even write notes about any of the songs after a few, because I saw where it was really going. We could always say It Was Raining it's a hopeful, like, oh, she can still do it, but she doesn't. But there's still that really good song from that last solo album. I give the record 2 stars.
I gotta say 2 as well. I think honestly, we could always say It Was Raining was definitely the last big surprise. And I was really excited. And the rest of the album.
It is a nice surprise.
Yeah. Did you hear Broken Heart on there?
Yes. And if I could just quote some lyrics from there. It's not a good song, but
Go on.
I just want to quote these lyrics. When your gig falls apart and you've got a broken heart, just get stoned, just get high, just get stoned to pass it by. When you think you've been had and you're feeling righteously bad, just get stoned, just get high, just get stoned to pass it by. So basically, she knows it's over.
Yeah.
But the disturbing part is, with the rest of the lyrics, as I had quickly alluded to before, after this album bombed, her record company folded, and, Nancy was already no stranger to hitting the bottle, and apparently, to a lesser extent, drugs, but she apparently hit rock bottom and ended up homeless, and eventually found her way back out of the mess that was her 1970s. She's currently on sabbatical from her English teaching job at a community college in Glendale, California, and along with 3 other musicians is playing with her old bandmates Alex Del Zoppo and Fred Herrera as Sweetwater again. But there was tragedy that continued happening with other members of the band. I don't know if you were able to find info on that, were you?
No, I was not.
It sounds like you didn't really try. I'm kidding. Or am I? This is from no. So August Burns contracted pneumonia and died while being treated in a German hospital after falling out of a construction elevator in 1979. Alan Malarowitz was killed in a car crash in 1981 when he was 31 years old. Albert Moore died of lung cancer in 94. And in the 90s, Herrera and Del Zoppo reunited with Nancy Nevins, who after years of voice therapy had regained her vocal abilities. I'm not quite sure what the extent of the regaining was, but they began to perform together in various configurations. They were reunited for Woodstock 94 with Nevins, Herrera, and Del Zoppo. And the surviving trio of Nevins, Del Zoppo, and Herrera reunited Sweetwater in 1997. So to coincide with the 30th anniversary of Woodstock, it must have seemed at the time, in 1999, that finally things were going to start happening for them. And VH1, which at the time was more of a fledgling network, kind of on the rise, they produced and broadcast a film about Sweetwater with the co-star of Felicity, Amy Jo Johnson, cast as Nancy Nevins, and Michelle Phillips actually playing the older Nancy Nevins, which is cool because, you know, she was obviously one of the main figures behind Monterey Pop being pulled off.
Right.
There was a lot of resurgence in the group. What happened was Reiner released Cycles, which was a limited edition retrospective, and Sweetwater, A True Rock Story came out. I saw it when it came out, like right when it came out. The main thing that I recall about it is that it features the worst hippie wigs. I mean, it took me right out of the movie. It was over before it began for me. So that's really unfortunate. So Cycles came out. Just a couple things about Cycles. Historically, this collection, it paints over a painting of those mediocre guys holding up the sagging weight of all that aimless jamming without the lead vocalist level charisma that Nancy had. They were a band of anonymous session guys style journeymen, actually kind of almost exactly like Journey before Steve Perry came into the band, and they were just the shit end of the stick bastard stepchild of Santana.
Yep.
And then 2002, they came out with Live at Last, and then that's the end of the breadcrumb trail. I want to mention first, you know, as far as their art goes, that a close look at this band shows that they were consistent. For me, they were consistent. Although never achieving great heights, they also never really went downhill either. The second and third albums, to me, are not a significant drop off from the first. At least as a relatively average band, you've got that going for you.
Right.
You never wind up setting the bar overly high for yourself. Some groups are born to be opening bands and are never meant to ascend to any next level. You know, after all, bands can't open for themselves. Who are the exceptions, actually?
I don't know. I can't think of any.
All right. Well, then I guess I was right. Sweetwater got the tally. Sweetwater got the tally with the big time. Don't get it twisted, though. They weren't meant for the big time. They simply crossed paths with it. They were lucky to. Some people never do. So to the surviving band members, and I suppose really Nancy Nevins in particular, don't cry because it ended in 69. Smile because it happened. Top 3 records. Number 3, Just For You. Number 2, Sweetwater. And I'm going to consider this as a viable thing, their Woodstock set. That, to me, is their top record. You can get it. It did come out as that box set, so it is gettable, streamable, and the rest of it. Worst album's going to be Melon for me.
So I think for me, it's number 3 is Melon. I just kind of like parts of it. 2 is the 1968. Number 1 for me is Woodstock. It's definitely the most interesting historically, et cetera, et cetera. And then worst, I think Just For You. And again, it's not terrible. Just I kind of like Melon a little bit more because it's definitely a different album, and I really like track 2 with Nancy.
Yeah. I mean, I could have been a little bit more considerate in my rating because the 2 songs that are strong are really strong. But for me, the reason why I really degraded it is Fred Herrera.
It's weird as shit.
But it's almost the plus because it kind of swings it into an almost self-portrait-y lane.
I kind of like how it's like a hidden EP that this man has just thrown into a record.
Exactly what it is. It's like Songs in the Key of Life.
Yeah. Oh, God.
It's very similar to it. No, I'm just kidding. Corbin, I want to thank you for coming on the show.
Oh, thank you for having me, Dave. I fucking loved every second. I just really cherish being able to talk with you and you know the other folks on the Patreon sphere. Like, it really means a lot. Like when you're just in a bubble musically and nobody gets it, and then you finally hear and you listen, you get to trade ideas, you get to say, hey, you know what? That weird ass Nancy Nevins solo thing, I kind of liked it more than you.
You're on the major tier.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so what that means is, to anyone out there who doesn't know how this show works, there's 3 shows that are released every week. You could just listen to the Sunday one, that's free, or you could become a lieutenant, and that allows you for $10 a month to get the Thursday wildcard episode, which could be a number of things. Or you could be a major, which is what Corbin is, and you get the Tuesday Private Press with Paul Major episode. So out of everything that's offered by the show, I'm just curious, what you look forward to the most with bated breath.
Look, Dave, I don't want to call myself a bottom feeder because I think that has bad intonations for me and for the records. I love weird shit, Dave. It's got to be you and Paul Major on the Private Press.
I appreciate that. The Private Press stuff is very dear to my heart. Plus, about the TV show we're doing.
Yes.
Not hoping to do, but
doing. Like, that is just fucking awesome, man. I mean, there are so many pieces of art that are just buried that nobody is going to hear. And just like being able to find those gems and just be like, this weird old dude, who 50 years ago made like an opus that nobody else has heard.
Thank you for recognizing it. Thank you for the contribution, because this is an entirely, thus far, listener-supported endeavor, and I'm putting my entire life behind it.
It's fucking sick. Keep doing it, man. I mean, it just rules. This is like what I want in music preservation for the art. I mean, there's just so much good shit out there.
There really is. And, for people like us, who the novelty never wore off, it's a godsend. To me, the ultimate example of value is just, with music, is how many good suggestions did I get?
Right.
That's it. When I read Mojo every month, how many of those records did I write down on my list?
Right.
That's, to me, the criteria for a good issue. Corbin, thank you so much for joining us, man.
Well, thank you.
Stay gold, motherfucker.
Thank you.
All right, that just about does it. Thanks for joining us. A heartfelt Discograffiti thanks goes out to our graphic designer, TODD ZIMMER, my beautiful wife and son, Jen and Mason, who are currently with me in Hershey, Pennsylvania, as we descend upon New Jersey today. And then, of course, Corbin Betleyoun, our wonderful guest and Sweetwater expert, and the entire Patreon community. I love you, and the show would not exist without you. Be sure to stay tuned, because this Tuesday brings upon us another incredible episode of Discograffiti's The Private Press with Paul Major, wherein we'll be tackling the Creation of Sunlight's record from 1968. Let's also not forget to mention this Thursday's wildcard episode as well, wherein we enter into episode 2 of Rick's Backyard, a discussion of REM's Document. Of course, as well, you'll want to tune in a week from today for Volume 1 of the John Landis tapes, his formative years, right here in the place to which you come to say, where the hell are you, Dave? Because you're taking your family in a zigzag route across the frozen tundra that I thought was gonna be this dumb old country of ours. Stay gold, motherfuckers. It's Discograffiti.